long time. I will try not to digress and stick to the slides, and I'm around throughout the day to answer any other questions too. So I just thought, I put some images up here of moments where high-performing teams are celebrating, and I think that as people that run businesses and are in charge of people, the way they work together, and as Paul mentioned, if you don't have the basics right, which is organisational structure, systems and processes, leadership, transparency, authenticity from the top down, you're going to struggle. And then you can do lots of things inside of that framework, that's that solid foundation to uplift the team. And certainly that's how high-performing teams work. They've got good management, good coaching, good sponsorship, all of that stuff. And then you add to it all the other things they need, which is a physio, a doctor, a nutritionist, a mindset coach, and all these sorts of things to get the outcome that you're looking for. Now that applies to all of us in small ways in our everyday lives, but how do we make that practical? Some amazing athletes. I'm sure some of you watched the Simone Biles documentary on Netflix. Just, these 0.01% people are fantastic because they inspire us, and they allow us to cherry pick sometimes elements of the way in which they live their life, or to reflect on elements of our life that can make us higher performing and better people to others. So I'll stick with this analogy with athletes for a little while, but I'm going to try and translate it into the everyday world. This is a Paralympian, fantastic athlete, had a very severe accident and came back and won this medal at the World Paraswimming Championships in Manchester. Now when you look at an athlete, they've got this team around them, and the team is everyone from their community, family and friends, which provide, I guess, that spiritual identity framework that makes that individual who they are, right through to these specific subject matter experts that contribute to the eliteness of that individual. And then I'm going to just present concepts. I mean, everyone in this room is highly intelligent and be able to join the dots between the slides. There's these quotes, take care of your employees and they'll take care of the business. It's sort of very simple, but how do you take care? What does that actually mean? And then now there's these much more, and I think unnecessarily complicated words that are used. Business should treat well-being as a tangible skill, a critical business input and measurable outcome. And that sounds really good for boards. And I don't know why we have to overcomplicate looking after people by using corporate speak when we're just people trying to get by. So I had this sort of epiphany of employees people. When do they stop being people and start being employees and become people again? And there's a contract schedule that tells us when they're employees, and then when they clock off, they're people again. But I can tell you as a doctor, they're people the whole time. And they don't change, and their needs don't change at 9:27 a.m. versus 11:23 p.m. They're just trying to get by with their family, their lives, their pain, their trauma, their life experiences. Their father just got a heart attack, their child maybe is giving them some difficulties, their carers. These are real things, and for some reason we have to synthesize them through a sort of grey filter in the corporate space, which is unnecessary. It's not necessary, it's overly complicated frameworks, and we call healthcare in the real world healthcare, and in work we call it well-being, and there's fitness, and then there's sort of corporate movement programs and all this stuff. And at the end of the day, as a physician, I see people come in to me at the clinic or bedside with the truth about their life, and they spend most of their working and waking life at a job, and that contributes to their overall well-being, and they take those issues into work, and they also take issues from work, and that is something that manifests as problems ultimately, whether they are mounting mental health compensation claims, which our GST money goes into paying out, and there's the business case is massive for solving this problem, and as Paul demonstrated to us, in order to address it properly, you've got to have a systemic cultural overhaul, right through to this patchwork of solutions where you have to sort of duct tape together about 100 different things and then work out which horse you're going to back. And it's exhausting because you're doing everything from flu shots, skin checks, you've got counsellors, you want to go from reactive to proactive, you want on-site, are the apps going to work? It's a lot. But there's evidence behind what will work and what doesn't. and a lot of healthcare providers have done that work already. Businesses don't need to reinvent the wheel. They just have to look to what the health and wellbeing world has done over decades, centuries, to build up a whole volume of what helps populations become more healthy, and just plug that into work. I know I'm making it sound simple, but it's much simpler than the way it's being made out to be. One of the big drivers, though, is you need to get the boards to wake up, and it's clear that human capital and people are critical to a business. You don't have people, you have no business, you have no agency or organisation. We can plug as much AI as we like into it and efficiencies around technology. But fundamentally, human beings are going to make the decisions around business direction, or an AI bot might help develop that strategy. But people, I mean, if we could look at how we help and optimise individual people and communities in the way that we look at our systems, processes, computers, logistics, supply chains, as I mentioned earlier, we'd be really doing well. And we'd also improve the overall health and wellbeing of society, because people are people 24/7. So imagine if directors' incentives and bonuses were tied to the wellbeing of the people in their organisation. And it makes sense, because if the wellbeing of the organisation is high, you might have 20% better bottom line. And therefore, if you can tie one to the other, why wouldn't your bonuses be paid out on those metrics? Then there's this stuff that's real. I mean, the cost of GP visits is increased, and despite recent announcements by the government to make general practice more accessible and affordable, I can tell you behind the scenes it's not that simple at all. And fundamentally, the gaps are going to increase. In general practice, wait times are increasing. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean you wait longer, or you get stuck in traffic and you're in a waiting room for longer, and then what it means is mental health plans get delayed. It means that cancer screening becomes delayed. It means that immunisations are delayed. It means that type 2 diabetes diagnoses are delayed. All these things, and ultimately that results in a fatigued, absent, non-engaged employee. And they don't talk about it at work because they don't have anyone to talk about except in the tea room with someone they trust. But it manifests as workplace discontinuity and interpersonal conflict and recruitment and retention issues. That's what, and this is, this continuity of humanity, your health and wellbeing in work and out of work, it obviously impacts at scale a massive portion of the organisation's ability to function. Well, about 1 in 2 Aussies, adult Australians, have one chronic illness they bring to work every day. And that can be a women's health matter, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, it can be chronic pain, migraines. It obviously was mentioned, over 40% of people throughout their life cycle have a mental health complaint, and that's the reported data. I mean, if we think of ourselves as computers with hardware and software, we're carrying this all the time. And if there are ways that you can improve the function of a person in an empathetic, evidence-based way that's scalable, and take that solution in and out of the workplace, you're going to do much better, particularly when these are the facts around human beings. I won't spend too long on all the data, except to say that mental health is a big problem. The reason that people don't engage with the APs when I say near enough, even that the solution isn't built for outcomes, but the reason people don't engage is because you're unlikely, no matter how hard you try to build it, have people, no matter how many Are You OK Day breakfasts and brunches are held, people are less likely to engage proactively with a mental health specific service. They're much more likely to engage with a service that will customise their wellbeing for them, whatever it might be. They might, actually, what really interesting thing that Paul mentioned was that sleep improvement and sleep related consulting was important. People will jump on board, I'd love my sleep to be, I'm waking up tired every day. Now, a quarter of those people, maybe half of them, might have anxiety or generalised anxiety disorder or depression. They may have work-related stress, they may be waking up at 3 a.m. every morning with racing thoughts, they may have postnatal depression, but they will go through the sleep program which will uncover the mental health problem. The point I'm making there is if you've got pain, you'll see someone for your pain, and then what comes out of that is a mental health related matter, which you'll deal with concurrently. But if you just say this is a mental health door, walk through it, you'll have far lower engagement. So having an inclusive health and wellbeing offering is really important to improving mental health pickup rates. And comorbidities are important. Physical and mental health conditions go together. It's very tough to have an chronic physical condition and it not weigh on your mind or become a mental health problem ultimately. So these things are compounding. So the earlier you can get in, the earlier you can intervene or support these and have pathways for supporting these problems, the better. You're going to have a huge return on investment. And I mean that in the most sincere financial way, and also the most sincere human way, in that that person will have much more discretionary energy for their families, their friends, their communities, and of course where they work. And risk will go right down, including workers' compensation risk. So I won't go through this. It's a huge, I mean, the numbers from the Productivity Commission speak for themselves. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. They're such big numbers, they're most unrelatable to the boards. What they worry about is, what's the risk next quarter of us with retention? What's the risk next quarter with respect to workers' compensation claims? What's the risk of us losing talent because we're not an employer of choice, progressive, or have psychosocial safety hazards mitigated?